Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Hey, well, thank you for joining us for another exciting, engaging, and informative episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. We know that you can do what only you can do, and that is not only press the like button, but click on subscribe, because that's your way to signal to the networks that, man, this is great stuff, and you want a little more of it. And after hearing your story today from Matt and his opportunities and involvements and experiences, you're going to want a lot. And with that, we're excited to have Matt. Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, Matt, everybody wants to know, were you born this way, or how did you come to intersect the valuation and appraisal profession?
All right. Much like everybody else, I got into it through a family member.
Oh, no. Did you like your family member?
I did. It was my mother.
Okay. We're just checking.
All right. It was my mother.
No,
in 2000, I was trying to sell marketing swag, in Boston to companies that were going to participate in or go to events, conferences, and whatnot. And that was a tough time, as you can imagine.
Ooh,
right? In the industry.
Were you on the other side of Y2K, or were you on the still singing Prince, we're going to party like it's 1999?
I was on the other side. I was on a bit on the other side of Y2K. I went through Y2K working for a company that sold, legal documentation services to lawyers that were, preparing for trial.
Okay.
And they didn't make it. They were a small company. They didn't make it. And I learned a lot about how to operate a small business through that experience.
Okay.
Jumped into another small business and was working out of a loft in South Boston before it was the Seaport District, trying to sell marketing material. And while it was somewhat successful at first, it didn't hold up. And I was looking for an opportunity where I could make a reasonable living. My mother had recently gone from being a real estate broker to getting back into the business by way of becoming an appraiser. So she went through the trainee process. She aligned herself with a great appraiser out of Sherburne, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I, showed some interest, and it looked like a very, interesting endeavor. So I went in, head first. I took the training, got my trainee's license. I ended up working for the supervisor that she was working for on a limited basis and aligning myself with a couple of other supervisors.
Okay.
I did that for a couple of years and wanted to take that opportunity to really get into the business side of things. So I joined a company called Market Intelligence. Oh, wow. Okay. Which was founded by Mark Sennett and ultimately acquired by the Fidelity National financial companies. And in that 2 to 3 year span that I was with them, they were merging with LSI, and they had advised everybody in Massachusetts that the operation was going to move to Pittsburgh, which was okay with me. I evaluated a move to Pittsburgh. I thought a lot of the company, and also was trying to stay local to Boston if I could. So I got the opportunity with ProTech to join them as a staff appraiser, and the opportunity came about. They had just landed some capital markets clients, and they needed some help doing tie-outs for the mortgage-backed security trades.
Sure.
Something I had no experience with, but jumped in first day, and I think we did about 50 of them. And ProTech was great back then. It felt a lot like a startup, although they weren't. They hadn't just started up, but great leadership. Really progressive, always looking to see what's next and how they could shape the industry. And so I appreciated that, and sort of the rest is history from there. But that's how I got into it.
I hear that. So you mentioned that your mom went from being a real estate broker to a real estate appraiser. Does that mean you grew up around meals, table conversations of real estate? Or were you part of the real estate broker team, posting signs and doing open houses and stuff?
I wasn't part of the real estate broker team, other than I knew all about it. She ran an office that I was most familiar with, the office that she was running. I saw the signs in the trunk, the open house signs in the trunk.
Sure.
Would see the houses that were for sale, heard about it all the time.
Okay.
So that I always, we were always around the real estate world, at least, from my memory as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And she had gotten out of it for quite some time and then got back into it by way of appraising. Okay. And I had never even heard of real estate appraising, which
join the crowd.
Yeah. Which is not all that.
Nothing about it. I'm like, what is it? Who?
Yeah. Not all that uncommon. So I got into it, got my trainee's license, and it was busy back then. If you recall, and that was in the 2002 range.
Yes.
You could do as many reports as you could possibly do while you were awake back then. And had great training, by way of the supervisor that my mother was working with, and had great training at the other shop, which was just a lot bigger, and they were trying to absorb and put through the volume. Although I think they did a really nice job. They supported their trainees well, but it was sort of the tale of two different cities. One was like an appraisal scientist, and the other was an appraisal shop.
Yeah, and that is a unique perspective that you hold, and a lot of people in the industry don't. Where you talk about that perspective of scientist, whatever the word is, who knows? Yeah. I'm making it up as I go. And the whole idea of being more in the appraisal shop. What was it like for you to be able to compare and contrast the two?
So I didn't get thrown into it because I threw myself into it, but it went from 0 to 60, sort of overnight. I'd say the two, one spent a lot of time with me going through the report, didn't clip my wings until he was comfortable that I was serious about it, and I understood his methodology and his expectations, and they were pretty significant. He had done a lot of relocation work, a lot of complex type of work.
That's great.
I didn't do any of the relocation work, but he was at that he was at that type of level and cared a lot about it.
Yes.
Which I'm glad that was my first exposure. I care a ton about this industry. I think it's important, and I think the same of the other place. They had a lot of volume that they had to manage, and I think they did a nice job at it. And the support was there where you needed it, but that's also where most of my volume and earnings came from, as well. So I had to keep up. So I'm glad I had my first endeavor sort of setting the stage that it's quality is critical, and I've always carried that through. That's how I feel today, and that's how I operated, which was good. So I think it was a good experience to look at both. One, how do you maintain an operation that's moving quickly and making sure you're hitting all your expectations from a customer perspective, and you have a bunch of independent contractors, some young, some new to the industry, some just on the tail end of a different career that's now appraising, and I thought both did a nice job.
I appreciate that. I heard you mention, and it's not something we've had a lot of opportunity to get some firsthand experience with, the individual that you worked with that took a much more thorough and detailed approach. You mentioned relocation. Did you ever have an opportunity to get involved in any of those assignments in any capacity?
I did not. Oh. My mother did a tremendous amount of relocation work for him.
Yes.
So I knew a bit about it, but I have full transparency. Other than talking to her about it, I have not. That's my exposure.
Yeah, that is a unique little corner of the industry.
Yeah.
I have great appreciation of and high regard for, because it's unlike most of the other residential work out there.
I think having a broker agent background probably helps a lot to be able to execute that too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And not only determining what the current positioning in the marketplace is, but actually forecasting a sale price.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, like where else in the industry do you actually do forecasting?
Yep, that's it.
It's a whole different world. You really come to understand supply and demand and factors influencing property sales, such as seasonality and what have you. So that's indeed something else. So you get this opportunity to go from a small business to over to another small business, to get into working for the same supervisor, and then getting a chance to step on from that. Did you recognize kind of early on that the operation side of the business was kind of more your speed and really aligned with your mojo? Or was it you kind of ended up there by default?
So I wanted to keep appraising. And so that's where I took it into the industry. I wanted to work for, a company and figure out how I could make my way, in that endeavor. And I was early on into that in my appraisal career. So I thought market intelligence was it was a really good experience. They were going through the acquisition and transition process most of the time that I was there, and I was doing reconciliation work. I was reconciling appraisals against BPOs.
Okay.
And so that was my primary in doing dispute resolution and whatnot. So yeah, I was deep in the operation there, but I was a production worker. That was generally the gist of it. I got to meet a lot of great people that I still keep in touch with, some who work for me now here, which is good. So
really?
Yeah. So that was good. I went to ProTech to do some of the same. At ProTech, I was out in the field doing work under a supervisor because it was still within that that time frame. That supervisor was great, really smart, very engaging. And I thought the world of him. I thought that was a good experience. And the CEO, Tom, who I think he's a progressive guy. He was always challenging the industry in a positive way, and that was both exciting and something you had to keep up with and sometimes execute on. So that was I kind of rose to some of those challenges, and that was good. So I became an account manager overseeing a lot of our capital markets customers, handling the larger trades from a BPO and TIO perspective. To as we evolved and we grew, then I presented him with the way in which I thought we could remove some of the bottleneck which existed in QC, and that was my endeavor into taking on a portion of the operation, and then eventually I became the CEO for most of my time, at ProTech.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, because it's always interesting that no two professionals' paths are the same.
Yep.
For any number of reasons. And in your case, early on, getting exposure to the capital markets, something that a lot of our guests and peers, for that matter, don't get exposure to. Could you share a little bit more about that space in the industry? Because for many, they heard what you said and they recognized the pieces that you said you were dealing with reconciliation of, but they don't really get it. Like, why is it there and what's the purpose and why does it matter?
So, I mean, the most interesting thing is I got thrown into it before really knowing much about it as well. And, assisting with tie-outs, which were basically tying out the variances, between the BPO that they were using to vet the appraised value, right, to see if they were going to keep this loan in the pool, and and whether or not it stood up, right? So here I am, doing those tie-outs, and I was no expert at it, and I faked it until I made it, and I faked it until we hired somebody who was an expert at it. That's really what happened. But that was really interesting to me. I never thought about, other than making sure that the loan, could close, because I did a good appraisal and delivered it, to the lender. I didn't think much about where the appraisal went, right? And and that's where it goes, and that's what continues to fund the market, and that's how you can make new loans. And so it was, to sort of go full circle and tie the whole thing out was really good. And also what we talked about a little bit earlier on the forensic field reviews and repurchase, then you see it again, and so it was an interesting perspective to be able to talk to, appraisers that are either, peers with and just shooting the breeze with, or trying to give perspective to appraisers that are on our team, or appraisers that we're, discussing, opportunities or orders that they have with us. Of it doesn't end when you deliver it. And I think that's probably the key thing that I think most people understand, but not everybody, and the other thing I figured out from there is that there's a ton of appraisers in this industry. Not all of them are doing field work. And I knew that, but my perspective really had to be solidified by seeing, all these appraisers who are both bankers and appraisers, who are, operations managers, who are, head of, valuation divisions. And it was reasonably eye-opening as this industry's bigger and there's a lot of opportunity there than one would think when you get through your 30 hours of principles and procedures.
Oh, man, Matt, you got that right. Oh, my goodness. That is so much the case. And I appreciate you touching on that activity that goes on way beyond the original, or maybe the origination appraisal. I was going to say original appraisal, but the origination appraisal, when there's, as you were touching on, that decision, is someone going to hold or to pass along an existing asset, in this case, a mortgage, as it's secured by a particular piece of real estate. And it's that appraisal, which you were involved in terms of the tie out to make that decision. It's almost, I mean, would you describe it almost as a fork in the road and you're the fork?
Sometimes, yeah.
It's kind of like it's coming at you and you're like, okay, you get to go there. No, you're going to that side. You're almost like the bouncer at one of those fancy clubs in Vegas.
It felt that way sometimes. I mean, in theory, you were doing, if you were doing a tie out, you had a lot of data.
Yeah.
You had sometimes enough time to evaluate the data. Sometimes you were doing what seemed like a full appraisal analysis in 3 minutes and deciding it was, in the pool or not. Now, that was all based on information that's already been done and a lot of preceding, analysis. But it was interesting. I enjoyed it. And I think it gave me a good viewpoint on how to run an operation and, what we needed and how we could scale and, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. And given, I thought I heard you say, let me check my notes, make sure I heard you. So at that time, when you were still in that space, you were more desk oriented as opposed to when you went back into the field when you moved onto your next position. Did I hear you correctly?
So when I went to ProTech, I was both in the field and on the desk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In the field when there was an assignment that I could do, still somewhat under a supervisor. That ended pretty quickly, within the first year. And then we got, we grew. We were growing pretty rapidly. ProTech was a small company that I would say grew extremely rapidly over, various different points in the the time there. And so eventually it just naturally migrated to being in the office and, and working with various different teams and trying to grow the teams that we needed, in partnership with the folks that were there. And some of them I led, some of them I worked with. And that was probably the more interesting, time, just going through that rapid growth and then kind of getting to we were never at a steady state. I never really ever want to be at a steady state. Hopefully there's always a challenge that we're trying to solve, but
yes.
Once we sort of leveled out a little bit and we could think straight and, continue growing a little bit smarter, that was a nice experience.
I totally get that. And then how would you describe the client segment that you were exposed to working at ProTech versus when you were at Market Intelligence and they were getting acquired by Fidelity?
So similar clients.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So Market Intelligence and ProTech both had a lot of exposure to the servicing, division. So default servicing, that space. So that was for a number of years at ProTech. That was our biggest, share of revenue, was the servicing space, broker price opinions. And when the market crashed, our revenue went up. One of very few companies that experienced that. And the big reason is because of the foreclosures. And we were doing a lot of, BPO or default appraisal and, and that type of work, trying to vet out, REO sale or short sale activity and loss mitigation. And so those were some of our busiest times. That's when we grew, most rapidly and hired the most people. That's for sure.
And given the experience of going through rapid growth, which involves hiring a lot of people, something that not everyone has experienced, and the role that you had, talk a little bit about that, because most people have nothing to really connect to. They're like, okay, I hear it, but like, what's it really like to have to experience that and actually be responsible for it?
Not that easy.
Absolutely, it's not that
easy. Yeah. I will say, looking back on it, so that was almost 20 years ago, so 18 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the folks that I will say report to me, I don't like that, I don't like looking at things that way. Some of the folks that work with me and provided, just have a huge impact to the organization were hired at that time. All right. And they came in fresh. So we had to use a temp agency out of Boston that was helping us grow.
Yeah.
We brought them all into the office, And so we had to expand our office. I think we knocked a wall down to the office next to us. It was,
Sure.
And then we had to move, down the street to a bigger office. So that was exciting times, and we filled it up. We were busy. We had a ton of people. We also had expanded our IT team. We were trying to do as much through automation as we could, and I think we accomplished a pretty good bit of that. So the temp agency was really helpful. We did a lot of hiring direct, which was very helpful.
Yes.
And we had to hire professional trainers, and I think that was a big piece of it. So we had a couple of guys on staff who were staff appraisers, primarily in the review side and doing short sale, review and whatnot. They were also former USPAP instructors.
Oh,
the Daves. Good. So if they listen to this and they hear me say the Daves, they know who they are. So they put a course together, a USPAP and valuation course together, with the help of some professional trainers we had brought in, and taught that to our staff. And we hired all over the organization, but the primary function we were hiring for was QC.
I see.
That was the bottleneck. And we needed to make sure that we could get everything through. We eventually built a lot of automation in and around QC, a lot of smart rules, a lot of ingesting a lot of data and analytics to make good informed decisions.
Yes.
But that didn't happen overnight, so we had to throw people at it. And not everybody worked, but man, did we build a great team. And a lot of those people are still here. And, the tenure that we have, across the United States appraisals and ProTech, the tenure that we have is great. So I'm in my 21st year. A couple of the guys who were on the panel at the Val Expo that we were talking about earlier are 17 years, and probably both, 17, 18 years. One of them we interviewed because we couldn't handle the tie-outs as well. So part of his interview process was doing tie-outs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He didn't know that, but he nailed it. So that was good. So we've learned a lot, through that hiring process. And the temp agency was great. They were more of a staffing agency, not a temp agency. They got to learn who we wanted. And
okay.
Yeah. And we wanted real estate experience. What we found we were getting a lot of was kids, who had just graduated from college, who got lured into doing apartment rentals in Boston. That was their real estate experience. It had nothing to do with what we were looking at, other than they had taken the courses, and at that time we were desperate. It was good enough for us. So come on over.
Everybody starts somewhere, right?
Everybody starts somewhere. Boston's got a huge college presence. We were able to get some really qualified people, and they're here today. It's a lot of them are here today, which is great.
That is definitely an educational hub.
Yeah,
in and around Boston. And
I'd say the biggest thing you got to recognize, because one, we needed to figure out who the leaders were.
Yes.
Either the leaders in, being competitive and trying to do as much production as they possibly could, which was important, and they had to do it well.
Yes.
Or we were growing, and we needed to continue to stabilize the oversight of the organization. So you got to really see who had some leadership aspirations, who was curious, who asked a lot of questions, who presented improvement opportunities, who stuck to it. And you got to recognize, I think you got to recognize who had the chops. And that was, that was a good learning experience.
I totally agree with you on that one. There's nothing like an environment that allows you to prove your ability and improve your capacity to learn, to advance, and to earn more.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Totally. It totally makes a big difference there.
Yeah.
And what a great experience to be part of, as you pointed out, having not only professional trainers, but professionals in the area of USPAP, I think the Daves, as you referred to them.
Yeah.
And be able to create that internal course and actually see, is the training that you provided producing the results that you want? And is it a process issue? Is it a training issue? Is it a people issue? And then be able to rework that.
It's almost always a process and a training issue. Of course, sometimes it's a people issue, but that's the rarity. So, you learn pretty early. You've got to, if you are going to expect a lot of people, you got to put a lot into it, right? Yeah. They can't be successful based on what they think you might want them to do. So, that was, I think the training was a pretty important aspect of what we did.
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I think anyone that's had the opportunity, responsibility, or maybe even unfortunately, the requirement of training other people, being responsible for their outcomes, recognizes that you train them well, you get good results. You don't train them well, you still get results. It just puts a lot more work back on your plate potentially.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure on everybody. So we called it, I just remembered this one, Protect You. Protect
You. All right. That's like, I love it. I love it.
There it is.
You know, McDonald's was known for Hamburger U, and you guys had Protect You.
There we go. Yeah.
That's good stuff. That is good stuff. And as the company was rapidly growing, was it staying in the capital market space, or did you all expand to take on other, call it, segments of work?
So capital markets was one of the areas that they had been able to sell into before I got there, and continued to sell into, and then brought in some experts from the industry that that had great relationships, and I would say were responsible for a significant amount of Protect's growth. And that was nice to see. And we got to learn a lot from them. They had come from the due diligence space and were able to see every angle of the business. So that was really good. And I think that raised our level again of our professionalism and our presence and who we were. But our busiest market was servicing. It always had been, and when the market crashed, it certainly was. But the strategy, from the top, from our CEO, was to be countercyclical. So the sales effort wasn't just focused on capital markets or servicing. It was focused on really the major verticals: so capital markets, servicing, first mortgage origination, and home equity. And we were able to get a presence in each of them. And I think when the market shifted and servicing work had dried up, we were growing in other segments. And that was, thank God we were, right? And that helped our staying power, which was good.
Yes, there's nothing more important than recognizing the power of diversification, especially when markets move.
Yeah, that's for sure.
For those that were either fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to have to take a finance class at some point in their life and learn about the power of diversification and certain number of stocks that you need to have, but you don't have to own the whole index, and how you get a overall higher quality return with a lower weighted average risk. Nothing like the power of diversification.
That's right. Some of us learned it in our finance class. Some of us learned it in our appraisal job.
And then some of us learned it just in making the wrong decisions in life. You're like, ooh, had I not just been all in on one thing, maybe it wouldn't have been, it was a great run up, but it also, much like the slides at the playground, that it goes back down.
That's right.
That's sure up there.
We'll keep learning.
How has your role, obviously you said, that desire to stay near appraisal, and as you talked about, your increasing responsibilities at ProTech, and then that company got acquired. Now you're with Stewart. Now it's operated at SVI. How were you able to stay both close to appraisal, but also at the same time continue to develop yourself for more, we'll call them, I won't use the word professional, but let's say executive level roles? Because that's not an opportunity that most people come across in the industry.
Sure. Yeah. So, staying close, I'll start with just sort of staying close to appraisal, with trying to be operational in each of the verticals. We developed, through our really pushing from Tom and our CEO, we developed one of the first bifurcated appraisals in the industry. We called it our ADI, Appraisal Desktop with Inspection. It was our own technology that we designed, limited scope, really in place for home equity. Now others have it, and it wasn't a hard form to replicate.
Yep.
So that gave me a good view into developing products for the industry, and also vetting those requirements out with the customer. And you have to have some reasonable presence and be able to put yourself out there to do that. And I thought that was a good strategy that we were pushed to execute on. And so, appreciated that. But, you use all of those opportunities, like building a team to try to solve the bottleneck in QC, to being part of a team that's trying to put a new product out into the industry, to be countercyclical and maintain a revenue stream when maybe something else, decreases. And we put a lot of effort into trying to understand, who we are, from Strengths Finder, which I'm sure you've done before, to
strengths.
I was looking the other day to see if I could find them. I have all 5 of them stuck to a book somewhere that I will find. But
all right. Let me know when you come across it.
I will.
I'm a huge fan of assessments. I mean, I do feel strongly about some versus others.
Sure.
But it's like the movie The Matrix. You get to actually see what else is going on, even though what you see might be deceiving you.
That's true. Yeah. So we use predictive index a lot when we were hiring to try to see, nice. What sort of personality we would get. And we did it on ourselves, so the wider the wider it was, the more people were going to feel your impact, but sometimes that wasn't always positive, So we had a lot of good communication. And I think a lot of my growth came from some feedback about how maybe I was perceived, right? And I think you've got to make sure that you're internalizing that. But I think the biggest thing is a commitment to communication. So, one, you've got to learn. You've got to know what's going on. You have to be curious about the industry. You definitely don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but you have to know what you don't know so that you can find somebody who can fill that gap. And I think you got to put results in front of pride. And I think that, if you can commit to those things and commit to a growth mindset, then you can try to overcome some of, everybody has limitations, right? And everybody has growth to do. So somebody's got to tell you what you need to work on. And we were pretty good about that throughout my career. And I think that that's important. I haven't always had the best executive presence. You could talk to, people early in my career and they would confirm that, but executive presence, as you want to have impact and as you want to be part of a large organization, and you want people to be encouraged to come along with you and work with you and be curious about what you have to offer. Executive presence and communication are the linchpin there. I think that those are critical. Knowing the business, being curious about your people, knowing what they need, being sensitive to their needs. Everybody's a human, and not being blind to the challenges or the opportunities are givens, right? And you have to operate with integrity. You have to operate with urgency. And you have to be customer focused. So in my mind, the folks that I think have been the most successful that I've seen, the ones that I have looked to emulate as I've tried to improve and get better at what I do, always thought of themselves as a steward of the company, but a salesperson as well. You're constantly selling. If I'm talking to you, if I'm talking to somebody on my team, you just want people to be interested in what you have to say, be interested in what you have to offer. And on the flip side of it, you also owe it to your team to bring people along that promote that type of environment. And that's a constant work in progress. Not everybody has a good day. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has a good week, or month, but I think everybody genuinely has something positive to offer, and you got to find that. And I think that's critical.
No, I definitely appreciate and respect what you're sharing. It's an opportunity. As they say, feedback is a gift. Sometimes you don't want the gift, but that doesn't mean you wouldn't be better off by receiving it.
Sometimes it feels like a sharp gift, but when you look back on it 10 years later, it sure was a gift.
80% of all businesses fail within 5 years, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. With so many roles and responsibilities that must be managed and have nothing to do with appraisal reports, is it any surprise that it's hard to keep up, much less having a sense of peace, stability, and profitability that comes from growing your business? Given all of this, you might already be thinking about exiting your business one day. Don't miss the limited opportunity to work with Michael, a real estate expert and professional coach. He has worked with more than 300 owners and entrepreneurs to find their highest and best use by solving problems that reach their most important goals. Compress decades of learning into days by working with Michael. Michael is famous in real estate and business coaching. With his help, you can accelerate your growth, increase your quality of life, and earn more money, all while ultimately doing less. Michael helps you not just grow your business, but also find new purpose in it and in your life. If you're ready to take control instead of being controlled, Contact him on LinkedIn or email him at michaelh@paru.com.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, some of what you're sharing reminds me of some definite memories. You mentioned predictive index in there as well. We happen to use culture index. They're from the same seed. Their founders split. They basically just operate two different companies based on the same knowledge architecture. But that point of gaining a better understanding of myself, in this case, of oneself, to be able to understand and interact with another is such a powerful tool.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate intensity, but I think when you're young and new to your career, sometimes you confuse, intensity with achievement, if you will. And, without that feedback, I could probably still be here, operating at, an intensity that was unproductive. And so you really have to learn about who you are, but also I think it's important that you're not afraid of the environment you're in, right? Nobody should say yes to everything. And sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and get what's right done. Yeah. So that's a fact.
And there's much truth in that statement.
Yeah.
Very much truth in that statement. And I also appreciate what you were touching on. You shared a couple attributes, but one you touched on is executive presence. And I can only speak from my experience. Obviously, you can share from yours. I think that is across a lot of interactions. That sometimes is a complaint that is lobbied at people in the industry.
Yes. Especially field appraisers.
There's where I was going with it. Mm-hmm. I've heard that a number of times. And I'm like, I don't know that there's some easy fix for that.
I think it's twofold. One, I think it's the vocal minority, because I would say the majority of interaction I have with our field appraisers, our panel appraisers, or even our staff appraisers is great.
I would agree. I think by and large, the majority is actually.
Right. And I just came back from the Valuation Expo. Now, granted, I think the great thing about a conference like that is that the people there care a lot about the industry.
They really do. Yeah, totally.
And those are the people that I want to work with. They don't all have to be at the Valuation Expo.
No. But it's not a bad place to be.
It's not a bad place to be. This year, we were talking about it earlier. This year, I think, set the mark for Valuation Expos, and hopefully they can continue to compound on that. But they're there because they care about it. That's really motivating. It's nice to see. I care a lot about this industry. It's been really good for me. It's been good for my family. It's been good for a lot of the coworkers and peers, and just generally, people that I've gotten to know over the 21 years. And it has changed a lot. I feel happy that I've been able to be part of a lot of that change. And not all of it has been easy.
Yep.
I don't know how to solve it. I think it goes back to a bit of communication. And everybody has to own their response, right? And I'll leave some meetings thinking, I got to own that response, but it wasn't great, right? And I'm always evaluating myself on, what was my presence like in that meeting, and hopefully it was good. And sometimes I got to go back and learn something from it, right? And I think that internalizing and figuring out how you communicate and provide good service is important. A lot of these are individual contributors in the industry, and we had talked about the appraiser scientist at first, right? And they're doing the science of the appraising, and maybe the customer service stuff is a burden to them because they care so much about what they had just put forward, and if you question it, that could be insulting. And I think that had you known maybe where this appraisal is going to end, it doesn't just end at the lender when the loan closes. It might go somewhere else, and the I's and T's that need to be dotted and crossed, aren't just because, right? Because there's an investor requirement, and there's further requirements downstream to make this loan saleable, and to understand the cycle of a saleable loan means there's more money to be put back in the market in a new mortgage and another appraisal for you. And if you think about it that way, maybe your service level will be a little bit stronger. But there's a lot of pressure on an individual appraiser, and I think as we communicate, especially from an appraisal management company, communicate with them, I think we owe it to them to understand that as well. I think our team here at Stewart does a a great job. I hear accolades across the board, be it the folks that were formerly United States Appraisals.
Yep.
Set a great mark for how they communicate with vendors. And that was the same with the ProTech team. And I think those two cultures are in synergy there. And I think they set a mark for what it means to be a panel partner, right? And maybe not every appraiser feels that way, but I know the team here cares about that and feels that way. And but we want to work with the appraisers that have the best customer service. Responsiveness is key. This is not linear. Things happen. And sometimes you can spend as much margin arguing as you could just fixing it. So
there's a lot to be said about that.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about that. I very much appreciate that. And you touch on that importance of it's a bit of a flow through, but it's also, what immediately popped in my head was back in the day, at some point, one of my friends got me into a multi-level marketing program, and you were part of the downline. And that's really the image that was coming to mind, is that series of vendors, staff, other professionals, be it the field or otherwise, while they may not be sitting in the corporate office, they are that downline from the originating request. And therefore, the more they're willing to be part of that, the more success everyone's going to have, and the more opportunity they'll have to continue working together. And to the extent they choose not to, as you touched on, you're not going to continue to spend any time with them.
And it's customer service 101, right? And that's how it goes. I mean, we owe a result, at the end of the day, and 9.9 out of 10 times we get it. And I think to a certain degree, it's unfortunate that there is a vocal minority out there that can stain the reputation at times, but I don't get behind that. I think that there are some people that really care about this business, and they do a great job, and they have a lot of pressure, and the more we can support them, the better off everybody is. But everybody owes it. Everybody owes a good service, and and so maybe if you could reflect on, how you did that day, and improve the next day. 1% improvement per day is going to get you a long ways.
Amen to that. Amen to that, indeed. You mentioned that having been at ProTech, then as both an employee of the firm, there was an acquisition. So now you became an employee of another firm. What was that process like, and what's it like to go through an integration?
The acquisition process was interesting because we were going through the acquisition process during COVID, where there was so it was
put two and two together.
The on-site due diligence was not there. The due diligence was there, that's for sure. But we had been through potential acquisitions over the years, so we had some experience with it and had evaluated some over the years. Me not as much as certainly our CFO and CEO, but I think the process seemingly went pretty smooth. There was a lot of nerves across the board, right? As you would expect. I wouldn't say any apprehension, but a lot of nervous energy to figure out what we're going to do. And day one through day 1 year, we were operating like ProTech. We hadn't rebranded. We were working in the back behind the scenes about how we were going to execute the integration and bring the systems together, and and all that stuff. To me, it was a good experience. I got to, my new boss, Aaron Fowler, is great, and he led United States Appraisals and did a tremendous job there. Again, his motto is low friction, and I appreciate that, and I think that's important. Low friction and high customer experience, right? And that's if you can operate through there, and everybody can continue to focus on what you can do to deliver to the customer, that's important. And also what you can do to deliver to your team and make it a great environment. But again, communication is critical, right? We're still working on the integration. We'll always be working on the integration of the two teams. We're stronger now than we were when we were two separate teams, but you're always going to continue to work on what does that integration look like? How can we fine tune and advance our products? We are heavy into the modernization with our own inspection application. We just rolled out yesterday to bring some new AI resources onto our team. right? And so, all of that, just to expand the investment we've already made, so all of it's exciting. And maybe when we were a really small company, we may not have had that opportunity for that type of investment, and so that's also critical. And then you spend a lot of time on the sales front. I'm often in front of our customers or on existing or new sales calls and trying to introduce the other verticals that maybe I had some expertise in, to customers that weren't using those verticals, right? So that's also really good. And you get exposure to various different leaders. Stewart's a very large organization. They don't, our part of it is an important part of it, and the lender services and then the valuation piece of that. But you get to learn about all the different aspects of what they offer, and you get exposure to those different leaders, all the way up to the CEO of Stewart, and you get to learn from them and how they operate and how they get things to move too. So you got to just be open to the change. That's the big piece.
And what I'm hearing is that from your early starts to being a real estate appraiser trainee to where you're at now and being part of a large organization, I don't even have a sense of how big Stewart is. I mean, several hundred people, several thousand people?
Many thousands of people. Yeah, more than 6,000 people. Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I think we showed up here with maybe 160, right?
No kidding.
Yeah. Wow. Of those people. Maybe even less. So it went from, small to big, but there's a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit here.
Yeah.
So Stewart has gone through a number of acquisitions and there maintains that entrepreneurial spirit. At ProTech, the joke was always this has felt like a startup for 20 years, right? So
I can relate to that, but could you share a little bit more about what you mean by that for others that may not know what that means?
So, you're introducing new products, growing rapidly.
Yep.
We had good process. We had great people. We had good commitment, but you were small and it didn't come without its challenges.
Yes.
Right. And, every day matters a ton when you're really small.
Yes.
And, and really small is different for everybody. But, to us in the industry, we were had a good reputation. We were a solid player in the industry. It was easy to get a conversation, but it wasn't always easy, right? And sales is not always easy. And sometimes because of your size, maybe large organizations wouldn't take a shot at you. Other times maybe they would. So felt like we weren't always pivoting, but we were always reacting to something different. Either a new product we were going to put out in the market or a new product we were going to put out in the market because a client demanded it, right? And so post the market crash, there was a lot of regulatory expectations on you. And so we had to react to that and change systems, bring in, new people, even augment some of the people who were here. Our chief appraiser turned into our chief compliance officer, and we brought in a new chief appraiser, right? So, there's just something was always changing, right? And it was pretty impactful change, but you could be as close to the result in the decision as you wanted to be there. And I think that's maybe the spirit of kind of a startup is, if you wanted to have a big impact, and you were smart and knew how to, and could execute on what the idea you had, then you could play in that, and you could have a part in it, which was good.
Appreciate that. Yeah. The reference to 20 years of startup, that just captures a lifetime in just one sentence.
Yeah, and maybe it's just my mindset, that
probably not just your mindset.
Yeah, probably not.
Probably.
I think, in my mind, I tend to have that, in the back of my mind anyway. That, you always got to be on your toes, and I think that's sort of the startup mentality a bit. But complacency is awful. When you see that in people, or you see that in groups, or you see that in different organizations. I don't see that here, but we've all been around it, and it is. Complacency is draining, and
it is. Yeah. It's I early on, as I was getting acclimated to the idea of a professional career, I worked at a place that's very well known and it does some amazing work. But I happened to work in a department that, when you say complacency is awful, it's kind of like that department seemed to be where good ideas went to die.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely appreciated they offered me employment after I finished up my 2-year internship, and I was like, and they told me at the start, like, look, we really appreciate you, and we're we'd love to have you back, but we just don't have a sense that you're going to accept our offer. And I'm like, not even going to look at the offer.
Yeah.
I like you all as people. I cannot do this. I cannot be a part of this environment, this culture, the way things go here. I like your reference to flexibility, mobility, nimbleness.
Yeah.
Creativity, curiosity, those things bring the future forward. If you want to be part of the future, go create it. Don't sit around and wait for it.
Oh man. I mean, that's the number one. And think about the appraisers now. So hybrids got introduced, right? They're a really small part of the overall population right now. But they had to react to that and figure out what does that mean for their business. Now the new form is being introduced, and you could either choose to be excited about it and figure out how that's going to, how you're going to implement that into your business, or you can be frustrated about it. And you've seen, I'm sure you've seen, like I have, some of the trade rags and the different groups, and going to be as successful as you put into it, right? And it's happening. And I think that's the big piece. And I think you get into that environments where good ideas go to die. And a lot of those folks, I don't call them folks, I would say a lot of those organizations, because it's not the people necessarily, it's the environment, that they're just hoping something different doesn't happen and they don't have to change a process or whatnot. And that's not a good way to go. And it's curiosity, getting ahead of things, trying to learn about it. Take it, AI, for instance, right? Appraisers are always worried about, the pay per report. And I get that. I totally understand that. AI could make your pay per hour significantly higher, right? Just implementing various different automation tools or taking advantage of the analysis tools that are already out there to this new form, right? It could, in theory, improve your results and reduce your revisions. If 40% of your orders are coming back for some sort of revision, this new form should help with that, right? And so if you think about how many more orders you can do because you took 30 seconds off of your process to a minute to 3 minutes that's how I would hope appraisers would think about it at the end of the year. Now I've made $15,000 more because I did X, Y, and Z, and I'm more efficient. I'm less bothered, and I've learned a lot. I think that would be a nice way to look at it.
I couldn't agree with you more so. And then given that perspective, what are you looking forward to or optimistic about over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
The industry is going to change. And to me, I think that's a good thing. I think I have a unique, like a lot of peers of mine, but I think we have a unique seat in this change, right? Because we've got to drive some of it, and we've got to bring people along, to be participants in it. So that's good. And it's an opportunity for me to kind of get out and learn and figure out how I can have a good impact on that as well, both for me and for the organization that I'm part of, right? I think that's critical. I think the way appraising is done has changed. If you were to, maybe it doesn't feel that way when you're in the middle of it, but if you were to look back on it and the way you're appraising, it's changed a ton over the time, and it's going to continue to change. I think values will potentially get more accurate. There was a keynote speaker who referenced, insightful data, versus just large data. And I think that's an important way for the industry to look at things. But it's, to me, just figuring out how you can create some digital employees, create some improvement through, development of, agentic AI and that type of stuff, so that you can take some of that clerical work off of your plate, become an analyst, maybe spend more time, perfecting your art as a salesperson or communicating with your stakeholders, that ultimately might be your customers. I think it will bring appraisers. I hope, I would say that it'll bring more and more appraisers together and sharing best practices and trying to learn from each other. It might create a smaller pool of appraisers, but a stronger pool of appraisers. And that could be good. I know you and I communicated a little bit after I was participating in the Appraisal Development Initiative in Boston, right? And that was exciting, to see all the people there who were interested in the industry, and they're going to know the industry by way of all this rich data, all the ease of access to it and analysis and technological tools that help them, not be form fillers, but be professionals, right? And I think that coming into the business now is probably a pretty exciting time. But that motivated me a lot, to see these people who were interested in it, to be there with Fannie Mae and and Freddie Mac and the Appraisal Institute and some of the other panelists. We had a staff appraiser from our company on the panel, Collins, who I know, I saw at the Valuation Expo was on the panel, and got to have dinner with him and one of the scholarship winners and somebody from Fannie Mae. And there's excitement, about the industry. And nobody's talking about how it was. They're talking about how it's going to be. And if that's what we can continue to do, then in 5 to 10 years, I hope that I'm part of the continue to be part of the conversation about how this industry should look. And I hope I can have a big part in it. That's where I would be if I look back on it. That's what excites me now. And that's how I would maybe base my success of who I am and what I've been able to offer.
Yeah, I love that. As you were sharing that view of the future, what came to mind is that image, and I'm trying to remember how many years ago it was. It might have been, I thought it was only a few years ago. It might have been 20 years ago now, the movie 300. If you remember the reference with Gerard Butler as King Leonidas of Sparta, as he led 300 powerful warriors into a deadly battle against King Xerxes. But that kind of came to mind there when you started talking about how things might transform over the next several years.
They're going to transform. So, why not be part of it? And I think the best thing I can do, one, I'm excited about it anyway, right? Is to continue to be excited about it. But you have to know, and you got to be curious, right? You've got to try the new technology, right? Yeah. Go to some of the demos, right? They're all free. They're all out there. Take advantage of the resources that are out there, but you got to learn, right? Yeah. Nobody's going to hand you anything, right? And so you've got to go get it. And if you can go get it and you can learn and you're curious, then you're going to ask good questions. You're going to find people who want to answer those questions, who are going to also learn something from you, and your environment and your network is going to grow. And then you're going to be around people that are excited about the business. Then you're going to be excited. Maybe right now you're worried about it, right? Or you're under a lot of pressure with your assignments, but just take advantage of every opportunity you can get to pair yourself with somebody who's really excited about it and sees a future in it, because there is a future. Maybe it'll look different. That's the network that I want to be part of. That's the network I am part of. Yeah. And, that's what I would suggest to anybody who's wondering, what should I do? Read the next article, look at the next demo, ask questions about it, try it out, right? And don't be caught catching up.
Yes.
Right. And then you're going to be around people who are equally as excited as you, and then are going to rely on you for, what do you know? How can you help me? And that's a nice environment to be in.
Yes.
And I think those are the appraisers that are going to flourish. Those are the industry professionals that are going to flourish. And it'll be a much more data-driven, insightful business and less manual effort. But that's okay, right? Somebody's still going to have to pull some of those levers. And why not let it be you, right?
Love it. Oh, man, that's fantastic. I really appreciate you taking a little time today and sharing a little bit of your professional journey, as well as your outlook for the near term.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Friends, thanks for joining us. And as we mentioned earlier, it is insightful, informative, and it is educational. And thank you for doing what only you can do, which is not only like this episode, which how could you not like this episode? And more importantly, subscribe so you can continue to be informed as soon as the next great episode comes. And with that, continue to have a great day, a great week, and do great work. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.